Take the exit. Turn right into the drive-thru.
Nope, I'm making dinner tonight.
You don't have time. Josh has practice.
Oh, that's right. I'll just get a salad.
And fries?
No, just the salad.
But salad cancels fries.
Salad only.
Fries.
Salad.
Fries.
Food noise isn't fair, but Mochi Health is. The affordable GLP-1 source that puts you on the road to successful weight loss.
Hey, can I get the...
Fries.
Salad. Sorry.
Learn more at joinmochi.com. Mochi members have access to licensed physicians and nutritionists. Results may vary.
It's not so much about giving people advice. It's about helping them identify the mental blocks that they have around the things that they want to do.
Welcome to the Smart Talk series, the show for professionals who want strategies, tips, and real talk about all things PR, marketing, and social media. Your host is Melissa Vela Williamson, an award-winning, accredited, and nationally recognized PR pro and communication thought leader. And now your host, Melissa Vela Williamson.
Hello and welcome to the Smart Talk series. I'm Melissa Vela Williamson. This season, our focus is on valuing advice and taking action. Today, I'm joined by Jannese Torres. Jannese Torres is the founder of Yo Quiero Dinero, an award-winning personal finance podcast and author of Financially Lit. A former engineer turned entrepreneur, she teaches Latinas how to grow income, invest confidently, and build wealth through ownership. Her work empowers women to break generational money cycles and create financial freedom on their own terms. She is also a Florida State board member of the National Financial Educators Council. Welcome, Jannese.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm just so thrilled, and I've been a follower of yours for years. I'm really into financial literacy, and if anyone knows me on this podcast, I'm very passionate about cultural strategy and how we infuse who we are as people into what we do professionally. And it kind of works out better that way, right?
Mm-hmm.
But tell our listeners more about you, your background, what you're focused on today.
Yes. So I am an accidental entrepreneur who created an award-winning podcast and platform that speaks to the importance of financial literacy, specifically for the Latina community. I'm a first-gen kid. My parents are from Puerto Rico, and I grew up very similar to many millennials, not learning about money and just getting that script from our parents that the key to the American dream is going to college, getting a degree, and getting a good job and working there until you're 65. And by the time I was 27-ish, I was feeling a lot of reckoning with that messaging, and it led me down a path where I started learning about the true power of money, what people were doing to escape the rat race, and I became insatiable when it comes to consuming personal finance content. And after doing that for a couple of years, I decided I want to share this with mi gente. I want to be a platform and a voice that can normalize the conversation around money, make it something that's not so taboo. And I've been doing that now full time for almost 5 years, and it's been an incredible whirlwind of a journey.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I've loved is I think you're very strategic about your transparency, but you are very open about what that journey looks like, that it is kind of messy and it's non-linear. Like that keeps coming up for us because I think especially if you're first in your family to work maybe in your profession, or like you were saying, first generation in the country, or like I'm second generation born in the country, but then like not, cultural enough and too cultural in some spaces. And it just gets exhausting and it's like
Yeah,
enough, right?
it's
But
so true.
yeah. And so we talk a lot. I end up talking a lot about how imperfect my path into finding my industry and my passion was, and how it's a natural part of life to keep evolving and questioning it. And I love that you had that kind of reckoning at 27. But watching you kind of describe it to followers, I think it's been very enlightening for me personally. So I just want to honor you with that what I'm finding in the work that I've done in writing my books and whatnot is that women really benefit from hearing other women's stories, particularly women of color and Latinas even more. So the fact that you're a little more upfront and honest about, the mistakes you need to make, and you start this way and then you move this way and you try this and try that and you go this path and it'll come together as stepping stones. I think it's really, really helpful to people.
Yeah, I think that natural honesty comes because I've created a really safe space within my community. And I think especially right now when we're in an era where a lot of folks are afraid of speaking up and kind of putting themselves out there for public consumption, I've never felt like my platform has been a place where I need to do that. And so it kind of encourages me to continue the transparency and also getting feedback from the listeners. I actually had a very recent episode with my sister where we talked about how I fired her from my business. And so, I mean, I was not expecting the conversation to resonate with as many people as it has. And people were just really thankful for the level of like openness and transparency and just giving them kind of affirmation in their own experience navigating the tough thing that it is, family relationships and then adding business and money to that. So
Yeah.
it's just been I've had continuous reaffirmations from the audience that like that is the content that they really care about and that really serves them well as well.
Right. The perfect story and the perfect image isn't working. And on the other side, right, working in public relations, I can tell you, you don't want to be like hot mess express, but it but I think and not over and over, maybe one point in your life, right? But you
Sure.
want to bounce back and learn from those mistakes. And I think that's what I really wanted to talk about with you is that, it's really important. I think there's a lot of pressure for those of us who professionally communicate and are the public relations counselors and whatnot and tricky and tough and times like this, right?
Mhm.
That we're in is that, we get pressured to have all the answers and sometimes we don't have it. So, I want people to be open that the exploration is a big part of what we should be doing and getting good advice. And I know just watching all of your kind of story unfold the last few years that I've been following you is that I would imagine that people kind of misunderstand some things about what you do now and your work and whether they should call you a podcaster or an influencer or what, right? Because we want to
Mhm.
categorize people. So, what do people misunderstand about what you're doing or your work, or what would you say about that?
I think people misunderstand the whole personal finance influencer space. And I think it's because there's a lot of variations or versions of people on the internet talking about money, and some of the ones that are a little less scrupulous have given the overall category a bad name. And so I'm thinking of folks who have used social media platforms for propagating like crypto scams or
Yeah.
talking about insurance products that aren't necessarily serving our communities well and things like that. And so I think what happens is we get lumped into this category of like, y'all are just a bunch of, money grabbers who are on the internet trying to, scam people. And I think the importance of being able to differentiate yourself when those can be like the overarching messages is just really adding credentials to your roster that reinforce the fact that you kind of do know what you're talking about, right? So for me,
Yeah.
it was really important from early on to make connections with mainstream media, like editors and writers, and have my story published in major publications like CNBC and the like, because I wanted people to take me seriously and not just be like, oh, she's just another person hopping on a mic that's talking about why we should listen to her. And I think a lot of that has really served me well in elevating my thought leadership, but also giving me incredible opportunities to turn this little like hobby into a full grown business where I get paid to speak, and I was able to write a book, and the advice that I share with people has been proven to be like legit, right? With the backing of um those partners. And so I think it's just important. Yes, you can have a lot of impact as an influencer, but I think it's also important to like not get the blessing of, peers, but the support. And I think that's been a big key to my success.
I like that idea, the support. And I would say also, in some ways, the vetting, like you were
Mhm.
talking about, right? You had to be really reviewed and researched by some of these outlets and these major media entities and a publisher to get the opportunities that you did. And I
Mhm.
think
Yeah, I
that's
mean,
just
I've had to hand over like financial statements and all this stuff. I'm not just out here making income claims and things like that without any evidence, which I think is something that people see a lot and they question it. So, yeah, I'm like I have no issues giving over information and sharing everything that people need to know because I think it does add credibility to the story.
it does. And I want to just underline that because in my work for sure, we're always talking about verifying facts, right?
Mhm.
Finding the truth, making sure that you have a good understanding of media literacy and you are a critical thinker and you are analyzing. We're not the yes people, right?
Mhm.
And again, people will love me and hate me for that, but I'm a great counselor because of it. And so I want to say that yes, you took a very smart path because it is important to not only have that, opinion of people who like your content and think it's interesting and think it's a little bit, educational, right? And entertainment, but at the same time that it is credible and it is sound because that's part of the problem. And I think culturally too, that there is a lot of distrust,
Mhm.
just rampant everywhere. But then in our community and how to deal with money, and some families aren't even talking about money. And if they talk about money, it's a negative because they don't have enough. And when you have too much, then you're greedy. And so I've been really interested in financial literacy because, I do want to have choices. And to me, having some money means you have some choice. So I applaud what you're doing. I think it's an important conversation to be had for sure.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah. And this season, we really want to encourage those who are in the professional space of giving advice to really center themselves in these really, really tough times. I mean, it's a never have I ever seen things that I've seen, read things that I've read in public relations and doing this work for over 2 decades, right?
Mhm.
But you can find advice, and then it's a whole other journey to actually take the steps and take some action around it. But you're known for really figuring things out and then sharing that guidance, especially how to make dinero and keep dinero, which I love that, like empowering part of, hey, it's just kind of an important part of life, right?
Mhm.
But, it's been hard out there for many people over the last year. I mean, really since 2020. And what kind of a decade is this, right? Even top PR and communication pros who seem to have like safe careers. I mean, those that I never imagined would call me and ask, hey, do you know if anyone's hiring? Like, it's been very, very sad in some ways. They've experienced job loss. We've got government shutdowns, economic hardships, inflation. What
Mhm.
kind of advice could you offer us to consider in these uncertain times?
I think that one of the most impactful lessons I had on the importance of being your own savior, your own parachute, if you will, was when I got laid off back in 2014. Before I was doing this, I was working as an engineer. That's my background and training. And I am a millennial. So I came of age and actually entered the workforce about 6 months before the Great Recession. And so that was a real world training into basically undoing all of the programming that I had received about how safe, quote unquote, corporate work was, right? Like that's literally what my parents told me. It's like get into a big corporation and you're going to be fine. You know. And I found that that was absolutely not the case. I experienced seeing a lot of colleagues that had dedicated 10, 20, 30 years to a company be laid off and replaced with contractors that didn't
Yeah.
receive benefits. And so coming of age in that and then getting to experience that personally, where I walked into work and got sent into a room and had 30 minutes to pack my stuff. And, it was the eye opening experience that really launched the whole desire to pursue financial independence in the first place because I never wanted to find myself in that position again. And so when I talk about the importance of becoming financially independent, it's not just oh, it's nice to have a bunch of money so you can decide if you want to retire early. Especially for women, it can be the difference between you being able to leave a toxic relationship or not, or being able to leave a workplace environment that is abusive or predatory in some way. And just from like your financial stability perspective, when you have income and assets that don't all rely on a single source, which for most of us is a W 2 job, you are in a much more powerful position to decide what you will and will not tolerate in any part of your life. And so, I would say like financial independence is not a nice to have anymore. It's a essential requirement for being able to really live the most fully expressed version of the life that you want. So if you have skills that you've been selling to an employer up until now, maybe it's time for you to think about becoming a freelancer, opening your own agency, opening your own business because I think we are increasingly in a world where work and the definition of that is changing with things like AI, right? And so we have to adapt and become nimble. And financial independence allows you to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when you're not just surviving and you feel like you're underwater, you have more of that opportunity to forecast ahead and dream a little bit and plan, right? And plant those seeds because you're
Mhm.
just not drowning. And I think that that's what's been so important about what you're sharing with others is that, like I said, having a little more financial assets makes you more likely to have some more choices in your life. And absolutely, I think it's super important because it's been heartbreaking for me where I've seen someone who I think is doing so amazing professionally, but personally, right? It's not aligned. Like
Mhm.
what they're living through and going through, and a lot of it has to do with like they're making sacrifices based on sometimes it's money, right? So
Yeah.
I think living more aligned and holistically is going to be helpful and help us to get through these kind of times so that we can make choices and that when life's on us, we can bounce back, right?
Mhm. Absolutely.
Absolutely. So we know like advice is great. And like you just gave us a whole bunch of gems to really pick through and think of, but it's not worth much if action isn't taken. So
Mhm.
what kind of actions are you seeing that professionals or just people that follow you, like they're hesitating the most on right now? Like what kind of steps do we need to take right now?
I think one of the main things that I've noticed as a business coach is that it's not so much about giving people advice, it's about helping them identify the mental blocks that they have around the things that they want to do. So, the whole experience of entrepreneurship and starting a business ends up for a lot of people becoming a huge personal development journey that they didn't realize they were going on. Because if there's one thing about entrepreneurship and just like putting yourself out there and learning how to price your services and learning how to sell and market yourself, there's a lot of triggers that are activated with that those kinds of activities, right? The fear of rejection, the fear of people saying no. What if people think that this idea is stupid? What if I fail? And I found that more often than not, I can give somebody advice on how to start a business or how to save more money or get out of debt. But if they don't tackle their mental health first, it is like talking to a wall. And so I think if you know that money activates your nervous system in some way, when you think about, maybe you're afraid to change jobs or you're afraid to, ask for the promotion, you're afraid to negotiate that salary, you're afraid to start your freelance business that you've been talking about for years. I think it's important to try to get to the root of where that fear is coming from. Because more often than not, if you don't address those things, no amount of advice is going to actually do much for you. And so that's where I would start, getting to the root of your money story, which is something that I talk a lot about in my book, Financially Lit.
Yeah, I think you're right on. The mental blocks are a big deal, right? Those are sometimes our biggest barriers and obstacles. And I think the other part that I like to talk to a lot, and I appreciate like your conversation with your sister just the other day, is that sometimes the other blocks are the people around us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Now, like I know in my experience, right? I'll just speak to my lived experience. Like I can be ambitious and excited and want to do this or that. And, earlier on in my career, younger on, the advice I'd get from a family member or whatnot might put a big impression on me. But the reality was it took a little bit, but I figured out, wait a minute, I need to find the right advisor for the journey. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Someone who's either walked the path or they're in the professional space, they have the network, they have the connections, they've done the thing. So I always like to tell people that early on is that I see it to be one of those like light bulb moments of, your family and your friends and maybe your husband or your partner, your spouse, your loved ones, like they may not be the right advisor or the guide for your journey in this space.
Yeah, that's such a good point. I like to remind people, like, stop asking for directions from people who've never been where you're trying to go.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then if you get the directions from those who have been, like you get there faster. So I love it.
Mm-hmm.
So of course, Janice, you come off as confident and that you know what you're doing and you got it all worked out, right? But having followed your journey, I appreciate that you're honest with how you figure it out. But like, who do you look to for smart advice on what you're up to?
I have an incredible roster of people that I've met thanks to the podcast. I always tell people if you want to meet the most interesting people in the world, just hop on a mic and start asking to interview folks because you will literally meet the coolest people on planet Earth. And I have just a really great close knit circle of fellow Latina entrepreneurs who I use as a sounding board, as a support system, especially now as a mompreneur, right? Balancing what it is to raise a child and also continue to grow my business. I've leaned even more so into those relationships that I have with moms who are also entrepreneurs. And that's really important to me, is just, especially because I run a business from home, it can feel like I'm in a little bit of a silo sometimes. And so I make an active effort to hop on a plane and have networking opportunities with these girls, and we find a lot of solace in our journeys together, because not a lot of people get it too. I it's not like I can call up my mom and ask her for business advice. She's never run a business, right?
Right.
And so I think it's important to curate the circle of people who have a similar background, a similar story, that then you can lean on for support.
I love that. Well, if you need a PR friend, I'm happy to join on it.
Done.
I have a group that of ladies, kind of like yourself, kind of like me. I call them the Scary Women Club. And
That's
it's not
great.
so much that we're mean, but I'm sure you get the same feedback, right? Like, you're so intimidating.
Yeah,
I'm like,
all the time.
I am 5'1". If I scare you, good luck.
It's true. But I think people use the word intimidating because it's almost like when you're in spaces like we are, where you are seen as a leader, um, I think sometimes that can act as a mirror to folks who know that they're
Mm,
playing small, and it
mm.
almost like amplifies their feelings of, damn, I know I should be doing more, but whatever has been holding me back up until this point. So I don't even think it's intimidation per se. I think it's almost just like you're confronted with the version of yourself that you could become. So what are you going to do now that you know that it exists?
Right, definitely. It's like one of those tuning forks or something. Like, there's a
Mhm.
vibe that's coming off, and people are like, "Oh." And in the best cases, right? I mean, for me, I know that's motivated me. Like, if she can do it, like, I can figure it out, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
But in the worst case, then, it gets a little, Haiti, but that's okay.
Uh-huh.
That's on
Yeah.
them.
You're not going to be for everybody.
You
That's
can't be in
okay.
the scary woman club, so that's fine. Well, I want to ask you a public relations question, because I advise clients on this in different ways. I want to get your take, because I
Sure.
think you've navigated it in a very interesting way. Like, you've publicly taken a stand on some serious issues here in the US. And right now, everyone's like, right? I
Mhm.
don't know a better word for it than ah. So, how do you evaluate whether you, Janice, want to speak up about a topic or not, especially as a business owner?
Well, the thing that's interesting to me is when I see creators who are afraid to speak up because they're afraid of like losing followers or brand deals and things like that. And I've never shied away from voicing my beliefs on my platform. So I started my podcast in 2019, and we were in the middle of the first Trump administration, and there was a lot of crazy stuff going on, and then we went through COVID, and it's just been nonstop chaos essentially since I started the show. And so I've never held back because I mean, one, it's not in my nature. I do come from a family that's very like open with their political beliefs and things like that too. So I've always just felt comfortable expressing that. But I also think that it's just been fundamental to me sharing who I am and like what I'm about, because I know for myself, when I am consuming content or patronizing a brand or something like that, like I want to know the story behind the business or the person. I want to know, like, are we aligned from a values perspective? Like, are we on the same team, or should I not trust you? And fundamentally, my platform means nothing if my audience doesn't have trust that they are in a place where they feel safe and seen. And so I think it's a moral obligation for you as a public figure to let people know where you stand, especially in this day and age. Like, people are looking for that. They're not going to be okay with silence as being your response. They want to know, is this the place for me? And so I've had a really interesting experience where every time I talk about politics or some world event that feels relevant to my audience, my follower count goes up. It doesn't go down. I don't lose brand deals. I actually find more aligned brand partnerships to work with. And so my advice would be, like, share who you are from day one, and then people don't have to guess who you are.
Right. Or call you on it because it's dissonant.
Yeah.
Like that's not who you were yesterday, right? And
Right.
I believe that smart people will evolve with information and experiences in time. So you can change your mind. I want to be very clear about that.
Oh, yeah.
And but at the same time, I think you're right. And what I typically advise clients is if you have values and a mission that you stand by, then stand by them,
Mm-hmm.
right? If it aligns and it makes sense and it's part of your what you offer and what you do and part of your pillars and what you stand for, like stay the course. You don't have to, cancel or burn down any like unnecessary, individuals or bridges or whatnot, right? In
Yeah.
my work, I really see myself as a unifier. So I'm very thoughtful. I think people would be able to uncover, right? And understand like Melissa cares about, being kind to others and caring about others and equality and, respecting others and whatnot. But there's ways you can be very gentle and thoughtful and consistent with it. So I want to applaud what you're doing is that for you, that has been consistent. It's a pattern of behavior and action, and it can be trusted. And that's what happens over time is that people can kind of build up that portfolio and say, that aligns. That makes sense for that,
Yeah,
brand.
and I think it's also important too to like know your lane, right? Like there's
Yeah.
just certain things that I don't feel comfortable speaking on because A, it's not necessarily relevant to my lived experience, or B, it's just like there's not a lot of value in addressing it to my specific audience. Right. So I think you also have to have like a level of discernment in understanding where the issues lie that directly affect your audience and that it's important for them to know where you stand because there's a million controversies, a million chaotic things happening all the time, and you can't be expected to have like a take or just like advice on any of that stuff. So I also just pick and choose like what battles I want to fight and which ones I'm just like, you know what, there's people that are better qualified to handle this than me. And what I can do is like point folks in that direction.
Right. An expert, right? An
Yeah.
authority, the research. And I think too, thinking about the right time, the right place, the right channel, the right audience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because what you have really mastered in my mind is really going deep with an audience, right? Understanding this cultural nuance of Latinos and like how they feel about money and how they feel about food. And that's why your food blog's like, a behemoth right now. And because yeah, we care a lot about our food, but we need to care more about our financial literacy too. So I
Mm-hmm.
appreciate that pillar. And and understanding like this audience has these preferences and these needs and these fears and these concerns and these barriers, and so tailoring your approach in the right channels with the right messages with the right visuals, all of that matters. So
Mm-hmm.
no matter what's going on in our country, I don't want any public relation or communication professional to misunderstand or be afraid of adding that cultural strategy and nuance to the work because it still matters. Our numbers of multicultural individuals in the country are still growing. And, staying the course and staying steady to serve those who really need your organizations, it matters.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
Right. Well, I want to let our listeners know on a little secret. I am really excited to be in Jannese's blogging cohort. I'm going to want you to tell us about your course, Jannese, because I really love that. But I really had forgot the potential blogging had, which is really kind of stupid. I was like, oh my gosh, hello. But that's what happens over time, right? Is that we get these new shiny toys and we move off of the tried and true tactics and the channels. And so I understand. I always advise clients, which is what made me laugh at myself earlier this year, is like, that a website is your home, right? Is your foundation of all your communication story. Like, take care of it. You own that channel, like, love on it, right? But I've had an idea percolating for over a year, and I was wondering, like, do I want to launch an advice column for from a Latina point of view, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so with that idea, it was like, well, do I put that on Substack? Do I syndicate it to newspapers? Do I take it to magazines? And then you popped up in my feed and you were talking about your Jumpstart Your Blog course and the power of owning that URL. And I was like, duh.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Why did I forget? So tell us, more about that and like what should communication pros know about blogging today? We're 2026 right now.
Yeah, so I've been a blogger for over a decade and it has definitely evolved as a platform, right? Like you think back to the days where it was just basically like an online diary for people to put the cool things that they were doing. Now, blogging, I feel is getting, it's almost having like a resurgence because people are looking for human driven advice and how to and helpful information. And so for me, that's what a blog represents. It is a place where people go to find out how to fix or solve a problem that they're encountering. I mean, that problem could be, how do I make arroz con gandules because my grandmother passed away and she's the only one who had the recipe, right? Or it could be, how do I start a budget when I've never had a budget in my life? And so when it comes to creating useful content nowadays on a blog, it should really be solving a problem. It should be helping someone to essentially answer that Google query that you're typing in that you're trying to, get a resolution for. And I think for creators, especially, and for business owners, there is a certain level of professionalism that you get when you have your own website versus your entire platform just being somewhere on social media. I, as a consumer, I have a certain level of mistrust for a brand where I can't find a legitimate website. And the only place that I can find you is like Facebook or Instagram or whatever. That for me just says, like, this is not a serious business owner. And so I think from that perspective, it's important to have a platform that you own. But also because social media platforms and algorithms change all the time. And so they just the simple act of relying on these marketing channels to be the bread and butter of your business, it's not only risky, but it's not smart. It's like you
Right.
never know who's going to buy the platform. I mean, TikTok was literally just acquired by a bunch of folks who have really questionable intentions for what they are going to use the platform for. And so, whereas it used to be this place where it was almost seen as like, a really open platform where you could share things in a much more free way, it doesn't sound like that's going to be the case going forward. And, there's been a lot of folks talking about new surveillance tactics and things that are going to be built into the platform. So these spaces have their uses, but they're not usually controllable by you. Your
Yeah.
audience doesn't get a chance to get more in-depth relationship with you and your thought leadership and things like that. And also, um, I think just it's important to have the ways that people can work with you on a platform that can't just be switched off by you being shadow banned or posting something that, they didn't agree with the algorithm.
Yeah, absolutely. And, and that's why I laugh at myself for forgetting that because, like, if I analyze and I did an audit on my company's social media channels, like, oh, like the following on Facebook and like YouTube, and I'm offering like expensive free advice, right? Like I'm
Mhm.
giving you good ideas and don't mess up your life and don't mess up your career and don't mess up your business and here's how I got into the industry and all this wonderful stuff. Meh, right? People are not looking for that on YouTube. They're not looking for, that kind of advice maybe on Facebook, right?
Mhm.
So even analyzing like, but in the beginning, yeah, organically I had more views and more engagements and more interactions. And then once I paid for a post, for example, to boost one on Facebook, forget it. Like,
Mhm.
Meta found their way, right? And hey,
Sure.
it's their properties. I get it. So in my world, we call them shared channels. Like you're sharing, like, like you're renting that space, basically.
Mhm.
But the
Yeah.
owner can do what they want. And so making sure you own your property and your own website with the blog. Because you're right. Like if I compared those numbers to even my company website, like I have way more traffic on my website, way more visitors. I can see what people are digging into and like what they're confused about in terms of the industry and what
Mhm.
they need more information on. So I'm excited to do that more for the public and offer just a different point of view with, like you said, like some sazon and some cultural aspect on like, hey, here's how some public relations principles can help soundproof and make your professional life and your personal life just better and more resilient and more successful. But it's interesting as I want to make sure that my listeners, being the ones who prescribe which channels clients and organizations should use and invest in and stand up sometimes,
Mhm.
don't forget the good old website with the blog.
Yeah. It's tried and true.
Tried and true. And also, side note, y'all, What I also like about Jannese is that in her course, she's teaching you how to monetize the blog.
Mm-hmm.
Because I will tell you, especially for those of you who've had some disruption in your career path, right? Having lost a job or whatnot, always knowing how to make your own money is important.
Yeah.
So, yes, all the way to the maximum, you can start your own consultancy or agency. But even as, side project, right? You could stand up something where you monetize it and it just brings some income and, might spur a little creativity and spark for you.
Absolutely. I think it's so important not to sleep on the power of, creating multiple income streams with a blog because there's so many different avenues that you can take depending on your business model. There's ads that you can place on your website. You can partner with affiliates and have links to different products and services or software that then you can get a commission every time somebody signs up through those links. Blogging for me was actually a really big part of how I started getting paid opportunities to write columns in major news outlets. And so my blog was essentially a resume of my writing style and of the different topics that I talk about. And I've also gotten speaking engagements, and the origin of my book is from blog posts that I had as well. So there, you just don't know like what creating that platform can do to elevate your brand and your thought leadership, and bottom line, like how much you can charge for your expertise.
Right, absolutely. And you're spurred on an additional question, Denise, because that is a atypical journey, right? To going from like being an engineer in a corporation to being the person on the mic and
Hmm.
being interviewed by media and being in that way a spokesperson for your own company and self. So that journey, what was that like for you? Like who helped you feel comfortable and confident in that space, going on media interviews, working with, some top outlets?
So I had a lot of experience with public speaking in my corporate career, mainly because the type of engineering that I was doing was usually where I was partnering with a third party contractor and leading a project. So I had to be able to explain to the folks, the boots on the ground, like what we wanted, what the success of the project would look like, just having those regular communications, and then presenting a lot of the findings to senior leadership. So, president of the company, the top board members, all those things. And so a lot of my background in public speaking did come from the corporate environment. And so I always like to say, yeah, you might hate your job right now, but there are skills that you can definitely use that are going to serve you in future ideas and future projects that you decide to launch. And so I'm really grateful for the opportunity to have been in these rooms with people who were definitely intimidating and who definitely made me question, like who the hell am I and why am I in this room? Like who am I to be qualified to talk about this stuff? Those were definitely my initial battles with imposter syndrome that I had to fight through. And I think that definitely helped when I decided to speak for myself on my own thoughts at that point.
Yeah, and that's perfectly said because I think going from right, what we might think an engineer. I mean, if you can break something down as an engineer, I think you're a good communicator anyway. You're what? But at the same time, like being able to help yourself build from the skills that you were already right working on at work in your day job is really important that we do with understanding that all these skills and these experiences can transfer
Oh,
and they
for
can
sure.
stack. And then you have the beauty of talking about your own life and what has happened with you in terms of building, your first blog and is it Delicious Delights?
Delish delights. Yeah.
Delish Delights, got it. And how that took off and what you learned through that journey and being, transparent about how you can go from an idea and one inspiration and kind of evolve it in time and then it leads you to here and there. But really when you're telling your own story, like we should know that story better than anybody.
Yeah.
So I just want to underline that for folks because even for PR people, meet quite a few of them who are very much like, oh, I'm behind the scenes, like, da 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 da. I'm like, well, part of that makes you vulnerable when it comes time for job cuts or,
Mm,
leadership promotions or advancements or when you need to or want to spin off on your own and
mhm.
have your own business. So
Yeah,
push yourselves, people. I love it.
it's true. You got to get good at telling your story.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this is great, Janice, and I could probably talk to you all day and have a lot of questions, but we'll wrap it up so you can get back to your work and your baby and all that good stuff. So I like to ask folks because I try to get people thinking, but what does smart talk mean to you?
Ooh, I think it means thinking before you speak, and I think especially in this world where like anybody can hop on a mic and say literally whatever they want to say. We have a lot of examples out here in the world of people who maybe should turn off the mic and speak a little bit less. And it's usually because they are coming from a place where, they have an inherent bias or they're not willing to open up their minds to, different perspectives and things like that. And so I think for me, the key to avoiding public relations controversies for
Yeah.
me has been like think before you speak and also understand that your message might not be for everybody, and that's okay too, but maintaining boundaries around how and why you decide to speak up I think is important because the same way that not all money is good money, not all conversations are good conversations that are going to lead to something positive.
I'll say amen. And the church said amen. No, absolutely. Like, not all money's the same, and there's a lot
No.
of different ways to make it. And I love that. And I love you having that conversation because that's something I'm even teaching my kids really young is like, not all money's worth going after. Not all people are worth being in a relationship with, and
Mm-hmm.
choices matter. So think.
Absolutely.
I love it. Well, this has been great, and I'm sure people are going to be inspired to connect and maybe learn more about your book and what you're doing at Yo Quiero Dinero and the podcast and all your offerings. What's the best way for our listeners to connect with you?
Yes. So you can get into my stratosphere at yoquierodineropodcast.com. There's courses, my book, the podcast, my blog, and all the things. If you ever wanted to learn that stuff about money that your parents never taught you, definitely come and head on over. And if you are a lover of Puerto Rican and Latin cuisine, check out my blog at delishdelights.com.
Yeah, get ready for the Super Bowl.
Yes. the Benito Bowl, as they're saying.
That's it. That's it. Well, thank you so much, Jannese, for sharing your knowledge and your time with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks to our listeners for joining me for today's episode. We love covering communication topics that elevate our industry practice. If you'd like to go deeper, you can work with me as a coach, trainer, consultant, or hire my firm, MVW Communications, for strategic communication and public relations services. My industry books, Smart Talk, Public Relations Essentials All Pros Should Know, and Latinas in Public Relations, Shaping Communications, Communities, and Culture, are also available for purchase on Amazon. Grab your copy there, and please leave us a supportive review. Book reviews and podcast reviews help more aspiring or hardworking pros find our resources. As always, think smart and communicate smart. And I'll see you next time.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Smart Talk series. If you learned something or enjoyed our conversation, share it on social media or send to a friend. To learn more about this and other communication topics, visit mvw360.com. That's mvw360.com.